there without freaking out. The myths of science and religion and the horoscopes and the shamanizing, all these things. But a polarity between the mystery of the self and the mystery of the other. And a mystery is not to be confused with an unsolved problem. A mystery is by its nature mysterious. It will not collapse into solution. And we're unfamiliar with that kind of thing. We think that if there's a mystery, well, you just hire a bunch of people, whatever kind of people, and they get it straightened out and issue a report, and that's that. But this only works for trivia. And what's important, our hearts, our souls, our hopes, our expectations are completely mysterious to us. And so how must they appear then to the other, if it truly is other? So we need to cultivate a sense of mystery. The mystery is not only in the other, it is in us. And this reverberates again with what I said about how we become what we behold. History is turning suddenly mysterious here in the post-quantum physics, post-modern phase. This was not expected. The 19th century, the early 20th century, they didn't realize this is what they were pointed into. Although some people, the pataphysicians, the surrealists, they saw what was coming. But here we are. Yeah.
The discussion earlier of how the mushroom was likely seeded from afar reminded me of directed panspermia. The idea that life itself was seeded.
Yeah.
Both sent down here together.
I should have mentioned that theory because it's the best support I have for the idea I was putting forth. What's being mentioned is a theory, the panspermia theory, which was formulated by Cyril Poonnampurama and Crick, who was the discoverer with James Watson, Francis Crick, of DNA. And they are proposing a much more radical theory than what I put forth, at least in terms of relative to biology. They're saying that prebiotic molecules arise in the greatest numbers in deep space, not on the surfaces of planets. That planets are only secondarily and at a late stage in the development of complex polymers and prebiotic compounds do the surfaces of planets become where the action is. I am not saying that. What I'm harking back to is, I'm sure you all know the old adage that we each are made of stars, that the atoms in your body were once cooked in the hearts of stars. This is true, but a unremarked accompanying necessity of that fact would be that there must therefore be some atoms in your body which were not cooked in the hearts of stars, but which were part of the planets which circled around those stars before they exploded. My point being that not all of this material that is circulated in the galaxy has been through something as violent as nuclear burning at the heart of a star. When stars go nova, their planets are blown to pieces, and biotic material that has evolved on those planets is injected into the general cosmic soup of circulating material. And that is more my idea of what the spore strategy may have originally been about. It was forms of life which evolved in very harsh environments, where a spore could survive, but seeds, for instance, couldn't. And we were talking at this mushroom conference this weekend about how if you have some mushroom spores and you want to preserve them, the way you do it is you create an atmosphere as much like that of deep space as possible. Ideal is total vacuum at minus 60 degrees centigrade. And then they'll last virtually forever. At any lower temperature, they will slowly degrade. So I envision mushrooms or spore-bearing life forms antecedent to mushrooms evolving in very harsh environments where then actually space was a medium through which they could migrate. And of course, this happens over very long periods of time. But if you think that the galaxy is roughly 100,000 light years from edge to edge, if something were moving only 1/100th the speed of light, which now that's not a tremendous speed that presents problems to any advanced technology. If something were moving 1/100th the speed of light, it could cross the galaxy in 10 million years. Well, there's life on this planet 1.8 billion years old. That's 1,800 times longer than 10 million years. So looking at the galaxy on those time scales, you see that the percolation of spores between the stars is a perfectly viable strategy for biology. And we know that the casing of spores is a very electron-dense material. It's as electron-dense as many metals. Global currents form, generating superconducting or superconducting states on the surface that make them even more resistant to radiation. And we know that spores are light enough that Brownian motion and convection and this sort of thing, definitely they percolate even into the high stratosphere. And there, highly energetic events are going on at a fairly regular pace, sufficient that we can calculate that a certain number of these, small for each spore shedding, but large in the total context of fungi on the planet, these spores percolate right out of the gravitational field and then are subject to larger forces. So it's radical to suggest this, but it's only because the empirical evidence is thin. The logic of the case is well-founded. What is on much shakier ground, of course, is the idea that the mushroom is an intelligent life form. And that's my special obsession and province, and most people say I'm welcome to it. But it's very interesting. In a book called Perspectives on Scientific Communication with Extraterrestrials or something like that. Anyway, a book by Poonam Purama. There's an article by R.N. Bracewell, who's an astrophysicist, talking about the logic of searches for intelligent life. And he concludes that no matter what kind of life form you are, no matter what kind of technology you have, if you are seriously going to search space by physically sending probes from one star to another, then the only strategy which would work would be what's called a von Neumann machine, meaning a machine which can reproduce itself, so that the machine leaves its parent star, and then or four of these machines are sent out in four opposed directions from a parent star. At a certain distance from the parent star, each machine replicates. Then you have 8 machines, and at double that distance they replicate again, and you have 16 machines, and so on. The notion being that only by this process of replication can you cover all bets, and that probably then what you do is you send a message which says, we are searching the galaxy by an exhaustive means, and if you read this message, please call the following toll-free number, and we will then initiate contact. And only by this means could you hope to have contact with all the worlds in the galaxy. And this makes it very important to understand what the message is that the mushroom conveys. The Mandayans, who were an obscure religious cult of Gnostics in the Middle East of very long survivability, have this very interesting idea. They believe that at the end of time, what they call the secret Adam will come to earth. And the secret Adam is a Messiah-like figure, but what he does is he builds a machine which then transmits all the souls back to their hidden source in the All-Father outside of the machinery of cosmic fate. And this notion of the Messiah building a machine is very interesting. It's conceivable that if there is an extraterrestrial message in our environment, it is a message to build some kind of device so that a less tenuous form of communication can be opened up. And Bracewell makes this case. To him, this is just inherent in the logic of the situation. And I suppose it would be an interesting branch of logic, the logic and the protocols of extraterrestrial contact. What can we define about contact that is so basic that whatever form of life and intelligence you were, you would have to flow along those creodes? This is probably an undeveloped field at this point, but it certainly could be done. It's like alternative physics. We need alternative theories of social contact and social contract making in the event that we meet an extraterrestrial. This is a fertile theme in science fiction, the logic of contact, how to make it without giving away too much and yet not get anything out of it. It's poker, but the stakes are very high. We're talking about the survivability, viability, and evolutionary fates of species, if not entire planets.